The morning began like so many others. Sunlight slipped gently through the dust-speckled windows of the small workshop, warming the wooden workbench where tools rested in quiet familiarity. Outside, the street was calm, no hurry, no noise, just the soft rhythm of a neighborhood waking up. As he rolled open the workshop door, expecting nothing more than another ordinary day, he paused. A dog sat just beyond the threshold. Not restless. Not lost. Simply sitting. The dog's posture was calm and deliberate, paws tucked neatly beneath him, eyes lifted, not begging, not wandering, but watching. As if he had chosen this exact spot for a reason. The man stood there for a moment, surprised by how natural it felt to see the dog there, like he had always belonged to the space between the doorway and the morning light. He didn't bark. He didn't move. Instead, the dog tilted his head slightly, a quiet gesture filled with intention. There was something steady in his gaze, something patient, almost knowing. The man felt an unexpected warmth rise in his chest, the kind that arrives without explanation. He found himself speaking softly, not because the dog seemed frightened, but because the moment itself felt fragile, meaningful. Throughout the morning, the dog remained. Sitting. Watching. Waiting. Every so often, the man glanced toward the door, half expecting the dog to disappear like a dream once ignored. But he didn't. Each time, those same calm eyes met his, and with them came a growing curiosity, a sense that this wasn't coincidence. There was a reason the dog had chosen this workshop. A reason he had chosen this man. And as the hours passed, one quiet truth began to surface. What the dog sensed would change everything. Morning came softly. Not with alarms or urgency, but with light. A pale golden glow crept across the narrow street, sliding over parked cars, fences, and finally, the old workshop at the corner. Inside, the air carried the familiar scent of wood shavings and machine oil. Tools hung neatly on the wall, each one placed with care. A small radio sat silent on the shelf, its dial untouched. This was how he liked it. Quiet. Predictable. Comforting. He stepped inside, set his coffee on the workbench, and took a moment before starting the day. That pause, it mattered to him. He had learned, over the years, that rushing ruined things. The workshop door creaked as he rolled it open halfway, just enough to let the morning in. And that's when he saw him. A dog. Sitting just outside the doorway. Not pacing. Not wandering. Just sitting. The man froze for a second, his hand still resting on the door. His first instinct was confusion, not concern. The dog looked clean. Well-fed. Calm. Medium-sized, with soft brown fur touched lightly by the sun. His posture was upright but relaxed, paws placed neatly beneath him as if he practiced sitting this way before. The dog didn't bark. Didn't flinch. Instead, he lifted his eyes and met the man's gaze. And held it. There was no urgency there. No need. Only presence. The man felt something settle in his chest, a quiet awareness he couldn't name. "Hey there," he said softly. His voice came out lower than usual, almost instinctively quiet. As if the moment required it. The dog tilted his head, just slightly. Not in confusion, but recognition. The man waited. Nothing happened. No movement. No sound. The street behind them remained still, broken only by the distant hum of a passing car. Birds chirped somewhere above, unseen. The dog didn't move closer. Didn't move away. He simply stayed. The man cleared his throat, suddenly unsure of himself. "Are you lost?" he asked. The dog's ears flicked gently. That was all. A strange thought crossed the man's mind, one that made no logical sense. It felt less like the dog had wandered here, and more like he had arrived. The man stepped back, giving the dog space. Still, the dog remained exactly where he was. Time stretched. Seconds became longer than they should have. Finally, the man exhaled and stepped fully into the workshop. He left the door open. He expected, almost assumed, that when he looked again, the dog would be gone. But when he glanced back a few minutes later, the dog was still there. Sitting. Watching. As the morning moved on, the workshop filled with gentle sounds. The hum of a machine. The scrape of wood against a table. Measured movements unhurried. Every so often, the man found himself looking toward the doorway. Not because he was worried, but because he felt observed in a calm, steady way. When their eyes met, the dog never looked away first. There was something grounding about that. At one point, the man stepped outside with his coffee cup. He crouched down slowly, keeping his movements relaxed. The dog watched him closely now. "You gonna sit there all day?" the man asked quietly. The corners of his mouth lifted, just slightly. The dog's tail gave a single, gentle wag. "Just one." The man smiled, and for a moment, he forgot about the time. Forgot about the empty house waiting for him later. Forgot about the long evenings that passed without conversation. The dog shifted his weight, then settled again. Closer now, but still respectful. The man noticed something then. The dog wasn't watching the street. He wasn't distracted by passing sounds or movement. He was watching him. Not intently. Not anxiously. Just enough. As if checking in. The man felt a quiet pull in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in a long while. Connection. He reached out a hand but stopped short, letting it hover between them. The dog leaned forward just enough for his nose to brush the man's fingers. Warm. Real. The man swallowed. "Well," he murmured, more to himself than the dog, "guess you picked the right morning." The dog's eyes softened. And in that stillness, in the space between a quiet man and a patient dog, something invisible began to form. A thread. Unspoken. Unrushed. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment, this quiet arrival, was only the beginning. The dog was still there the next morning. The man noticed him before he fully opened the workshop door, a familiar shape, resting in the same spot as yesterday. Sitting. Waiting. For a brief second, the man wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing. But there he was. Same calm posture. Same quiet presence. "Morning," the man said, almost without thinking. His voice carried a hint of surprise, and something else. Relief. The dog lifted his head slowly, as if he'd been awake for a while. His tail gave another single, gentle wag. Just one. No excitement. No rush. The man paused again, leaning against the doorframe. He studied the dog more carefully this time. The fur around the dog's chest was slightly lighter, catching the soft morning light. His eyes, deep and steady, seemed older than they should have been. Not tired. Experienced. "You belong to someone?" the man asked. The question lingered in the air. The dog didn't respond, not in the way people expected dogs to. He simply stayed where he was. The man sighed quietly and stepped inside, setting his lunch bag down. He turned on the lights, the workshop filling with a warm glow that softened the sharp edges of metal and wood. Through the open door, he could still see the dog. Watching. As the hours passed, a pattern began to form. The dog didn't wander. Didn't explore the street. Didn't chase sounds or passing movement. He sat through it all. When the man worked near the door, the dog's eyes followed him. When the man moved deeper into the workshop, the dog stayed, but his head tilted slightly, tracking each motion. Not clingy. Attentive. Around mid-morning, the man brought out a small bowl of water. He placed it just outside the door, then stepped back. The dog looked at the bowl, then back at the man. For a moment, he didn't move. The man felt his brow furrow. "It's for you," he said gently. The dog stood slowly, deliberately, and took a few careful steps forward. He drank quietly, then returned to his spot. The bowl stayed. The dog resumed waiting. Something about that stayed with the man. Not the drinking, but the returning. As if the dog had completed a task, and gone back to what mattered. Later, when the sun shifted and the light softened, the man found himself sitting on the workshop steps, wiping his hands with a rag. The dog was close now. Still sitting. "You don't ask for much, do you?" the man said. The dog's ears flicked at the sound of his voice. That was all. The man laughed under his breath. "You're not much for conversation." He leaned back against the railing, eyes drifting upward. A memory surfaced uninvited. Quiet afternoons. Someone else sitting nearby. No need for words. He hadn't thought about that in a long time. The dog shifted slightly, adjusting his position so the sunlight warmed his side. He let out a slow breath, content. The man noticed how intentional everything about the dog seemed. Nothing wasted. Nothing rushed. That night, the man closed the workshop later than usual. The sky had darkened, the streetlights humming softly. "All right," he said, stepping outside. "Time for you to head home." The dog looked up. Didn't move. The man hesitated. "Well, I guess I'll see you around," he added, unsure why his chest felt heavier than it should. He locked the door and walked away. After a few steps, he glanced back. The dog was still sitting there watching him go. The next morning, the dog was there again. Same spot. Same posture. The man stopped short, keys still in his hand. "You're serious," he murmured. The dog's tail moved once. That was when the man realized something important. The dog wasn't waiting for food. He wasn't waiting for shelter. He was waiting for him. The thought didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet. Like the truth often does. The man set his things down more slowly that day. He talked more softly, casually, about nothing in particular. The dog listened. And in that simple routine, morning after morning, the waiting began to mean something more. Not need. Not dependence. But choice. The dog had chosen this place. This man. And as the days passed, the man began to sense it. This wasn't just a dog sitting by a workshop. It was a presence, holding space. For something still unnamed. By the third morning, the man no longer startled when he saw the dog. He smiled instead. The workshop door rolled open with the same familiar creak, and there the dog was sitting in his quiet place, as if he had never left. "Good to see you," the man said. The words surprised him as much as they felt right. The dog's ears lifted slightly. His tail moved once, then settled. The man set his coffee down and went about his routine. But something had shifted. The dog was no longer a question. He was a presence. As the morning light spilled across the concrete floor, the man noticed himself adjusting his movements. Slowing down. Softening. Not because the dog required it, but because the dog inspired it. Every so often, the man glanced toward the doorway. Each time, the dog met his eyes. It became a quiet exchange. A look. A pause. A shared moment that passed without sound. Around mid-morning, a delivery truck rumbled down the street, breaking the calm. The man glanced outside instinctively. The dog didn't flinch. He watched the truck pass, then turned his attention back to the workshop. Back to the man. The man felt a subtle curiosity bloom inside him. "Most dogs would have chased that," he said lightly. The dog's head tilted just enough to acknowledge the sound of his voice. The man stepped outside and sat on the edge of the steps. He didn't call the dog over. He simply sat. After a few moments, the dog stood and walked closer. Unhurried. Measured. He stopped a short distance away and sat again. The space between them felt intentional, comfortable. "You don't seem like the wandering type," the man said. He noticed details now. The way the dog's breathing slowed when the man spoke. The way his eyes softened, never sharp or demanding. The way he never turned his back fully, always aware, always present. The man found himself wondering where the dog went at night. Who he belonged to. Or if belonging was something the dog was still deciding. That thought stayed with him longer than he expected. Later that day, the man took a break earlier than usual. He brought out a small piece of sandwich and held it loosely in his hand. He didn't offer it right away. The dog watched him. Not with hunger, but curiosity. The man held the food out slowly. "If you want," he said. The dog stepped forward, careful not to rush. He took the food gently, barely touching the man's fingers. Then, just as before, he returned to his spot. The man exhaled softly. "Always back to waiting," he murmured. As afternoon stretched on, the man realized he was talking more. About the weather. About work. About nothing at all. The dog listened, or at least, he stayed. And that felt like listening. In the quiet moments between tasks, memories surfaced. Small ones. Sitting beside someone without needing to fill the silence. Feeling understood without explanation. The man shook his head slightly, as if to clear the thought. He looked back toward the dog. Still there. Steady. As the sun lowered, painting the street in amber tones, the man noticed something new. The dog wasn't just watching him. He was watching the door. Every time the man stepped farther inside, the dog's gaze followed, then returned to the threshold. Guarding it. Not aggressively. Protectively. The realization sent a gentle chill through the man, not fear, but wonder. "What are you watching for?" he asked quietly. The dog didn't answer. But his posture shifted, just slightly. As if ready. The man felt the curiosity settle deeper now. Not restless. Not urgent. Patient. Like the dog himself. When the man closed the workshop for the evening, he lingered again. Longer this time. He crouched down, resting his forearms on his knees. "You've got a reason," he said softly. "I can feel it." The dog stepped closer than he ever had before. Close enough for the man to feel his warmth. Close enough to hear his steady breathing. For a long moment, they stayed like that. Two quiet beings, sharing a space between questions and answers. The dog didn't need to explain. And the man didn't need to know, not yet. But something was changing. Curiosity had turned into connection. And connection was beginning to feel like the start of something much deeper. Silence changed when the dog was there. It wasn't empty anymore. It had shape. Weight. Comfort. By the fourth day, the man stopped checking the time as often. Morning arrived, the workshop door opened, and the dog was already waiting. Same place. Same calm posture. "Morning," the man said, softly. The dog lifted his eyes. That was enough. Inside the workshop, sunlight filtered through the windows in long, warm lines, catching dust in the air. The machine stayed quiet longer than usual. The man moved slowly, letting the day settle around him. The dog sat near the doorway, half in the light, half in the shade. Balanced. As the hours passed, the silence between them grew familiar. Not awkward. Not heavy. Shared. At one point, the man sat down on a stool and simply watched the light move across the floor. The dog adjusted his position slightly, turning so the warmth reached his side. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The man realized something then. He hadn't spent time like this in years, sitting beside another presence without the pull of conversation or expectation. It reminded him of a quieter version of himself. Back when silence felt safe. A breeze moved through the open door, carrying the faint scent of cut grass. The dog's ears flicked gently. The man smiled. "You hear everything, don't you?" The dog didn't respond, but he didn't miss anything either. Later, the man worked on a small wooden piece, sanding it carefully. The steady rhythm matched the slow pace of the day. When he paused, the dog shifted closer. Not touching. Just near enough. The man noticed the warmth of the dog's presence, even without contact. It grounded him. He found himself breathing deeper. Slower. Time stretched in the best way. Around midday, the man stepped outside and sat on the ground instead of the steps. The concrete was warm beneath his palms. The dog stood, walked over, and sat beside him. This time, no space between them. Their shoulders didn't touch. But they were close enough to feel it. The man swallowed. He didn't reach out. He let the moment exist. Minutes passed. Cars came and went. Voices echoed faintly from down the street. None of it mattered. What do you see? The man asked quietly. The dog's gaze stayed forward, focused on the street ahead. Calm. Alert. The man followed his line of sight. Nothing unusual. Yet the dog's attention never wavered. The man felt a subtle ache in his chest. Not pain. Recognition. He'd spent a long time filling his days with work so he wouldn't have to sit with moments like this. But now, he didn't want to move. The dog let out a slow breath. So did the man. In that shared exhale, something eased. As afternoon faded, the light grew softer, more golden. The workshop felt warmer, cozier. The man closed his eyes briefly, listening to the quiet. When he opened them, the dog was watching him. Not directly. From the corner of his eye. Checking in. The man smiled. I'm all right, he said, without thinking. The dog seemed to accept that. Later, when it was time to close up, the man hesitated again. He sat on the steps longer than necessary. The dog remained beside him. I don't know what you're waiting for, the man admitted. But I think. I'm glad you are. The dog leaned just slightly closer. Not pressing. Not demanding. Present. The man rested his hand on the ground between them. The dog's paw touched it gently. No weight. No pressure. Just contact. The man felt his throat tighten. He didn't pull away. The moment passed quietly, the way meaningful moments often do. When the man finally stood, the dog rose with him. They looked at each other for a long beat. Nothing needed to be said. As the workshop door closed and the street settled into evening, the man realized something profound. The dog wasn't filling the silence. He was sharing it. And in that shared silence, a bond had formed. Not loudly. Not suddenly. But deeply. By the fifth day, the workshop felt different. Not changed. But warmer. The man noticed it the moment he stepped inside. The way the light seemed softer. The way the air felt less heavy. The dog was already there. Of course he was. Sitting in his place, calm and steady, as if the rhythm of the days had always included him. Hey, the man said. Not a greeting anymore. A recognition. The dog's tail moved once. That small motion had become familiar now. A quiet acknowledgement that felt personal. The man set his coffee down and began his work. But something else had started happening. The dog no longer felt like a visitor. He felt known. The man couldn't explain it. There was no memory to attach to the feeling, no clear reason. Only a sense. Deep and gentle. That this presence fit. As the morning unfolded, the dog shifted positions now and then, following the movement of the light. Each time, he chose a spot where he could still see the man. Not watching closely. Just aware. At one point, the man reached for a tool and paused. You ever notice how some things just feel right? He said quietly. The dog looked up. The man chuckled under his breath. Guess that was a strange thing to ask. But the dog didn't seem confused. He simply stayed. Later, the man brought out an old blanket, thin, worn at the edges. He folded it and placed it near the doorway. The dog looked at it. Then at the man. Then, slowly, he lay down. Not fully relaxed. Not curled up. Resting. The man felt something loosen inside his chest. "Yeah," he murmured. "That looks better." The hours passed gently. The dog slept lightly, lifting his head whenever the man moved too quickly, then settling again once the rhythm returned. There was trust in that. In the afternoon, the man worked on a piece that required careful attention. His hands moved slowly, deliberately. He felt focused, but not tense. Every so often, he glanced toward the doorway. The dog was there. Always there. The man realized he hadn't thought about being alone all day. That realization caught him off guard. He leaned back against the workbench, breathing out slowly. "You know," he said, "I used to have someone who sat like that." The dog's ears flicked. Didn't say much. Just stayed. The man stared at the floor, the memory settling softly rather than sharply. "I didn't realize how much I missed it." The dog shifted closer. Not abruptly. Not urgently. Just enough to shorten the distance. The man didn't move. He let the moment find its place. As evening approached, the light outside turned golden again. The workshop glowed. The man noticed the dog standing now, watching the street with quiet focus. Something about his posture had changed. More alert. Purposeful. "Everything okay?" the man asked. The dog didn't look back. The man felt a small ripple of curiosity, but no fear. He trusted the dog's calm. After a while, the dog relaxed again, returning to his resting place. The moment passed. But it stayed with the man. That night, as the man locked the workshop, he hesitated. "You coming back tomorrow?" he asked softly. The question surprised him. The dog looked up at him. Those steady eyes held something warm. And certain. The dog didn't answer. But he didn't need to. The next morning, the man arrived earlier than usual. And there the dog was. Same place. Same calm. The man smiled wide this time. "Figured," he said. As he opened the door, the dog stood and followed him just inside the threshold. Not crossing fully. Just enough to be included. The man paused. "You can come in," he said gently. The dog stepped forward. Then stopped. He sat again. Waiting. The man felt a quiet understanding settle in his chest. Some bonds don't rush. They grow. At their own pace. And this one. This felt familiar. Not because it had happened before. But because it was happening exactly the way it should. The sixth morning arrived with a soft, golden haze. The man opened the workshop door and found the dog already in place, sitting just outside the threshold. It had become part of the routine, almost natural. He stepped inside, coffee in hand, and paused. Something felt different today. The dog's eyes were fixed on the street, ears twitching slightly. Not with alarm. Not with fear. But with focus. Purposeful focus. The man followed the gaze. Nothing unusual at first glance. The street was quiet. Neighbors moving slowly, carrying newspapers or walking their dogs. Cars came and went in measured rhythm. Yet the dog's attention never wavered. He stood up carefully and moved a few steps forward, then paused. Tail straight, body calm, yet alert. The man noticed the subtle changes in his posture, something shifting, as if the dog had sensed an unseen thread in the day. Curiosity nudged the man forward. He stepped outside, keeping a cautious distance. "Hey, what is it?" he murmured. The dog turned his head slightly, looking back at the man. As if saying, "Watch closely. See what I see." And then, faintly, a soft whimper, barely audible, came from an alley across the street. The man hadn't noticed it before. The dog took a careful step closer, his ears attuned to every sound. The man froze. He felt a strange flutter in his chest, the same gentle tension that had grown steadily over the past days. He realized he was relying on the dog's intuition, even without fully understanding it. Minutes passed. The sound grew slightly stronger, a small, distressed noise. The man's pulse quickened, but not with fear. With anticipation. With wonder. The dog moved closer to the alley, glancing back at the man, inviting him silently to follow. The man's breath caught in his throat. He hesitated, then stepped forward. They approached together. Side by side, silent but connected. Each step deliberate, paced. And there it was, a small bundle of blankets in the alley. A tiny kitten, mewling softly, shivering. No one had seen it before. The dog sat beside it, calm and composed. Not aggressive. Not anxious. Just present. The man knelt carefully, letting the moment stretch. He glanced at the dog. Their eyes met. A silent understanding passed between them. "You knew," the man whispered. "You knew it needed help." The dog tilted his head slightly. No words, only presence. And that presence was enough. The man carefully picked up the kitten, wrapping it in a spare rag from his workshop. The dog stayed close, watching, ensuring that the fragile life in the man's hands remained safe. The man felt a warmth bloom in his chest. A release of all the small tensions from the morning. He realized the dog wasn't just a companion for himself. He was a guide. A gentle guardian for all who crossed their path. Once the kitten was safely inside the workshop, the man set it down in a small cardboard box lined with old towels. The dog sat at the threshold, watching them. Eyes soft. Calm. Content. The man knelt beside the kitten, running a careful hand over its tiny body. He looked up at the dog. You knew what to do," he said, voice quiet but full of awe. The dog's tail wagged once. Slowly. Deliberately. The moment stretched, serene and unhurried. The workshop filled with warmth, not just sunlight, but the glow of understanding. A bond deepened not only between man and dog, but between them and the lives they touched together. As the afternoon light softened, the man looked at the dog with renewed gratitude. "I don't know how you do it," he murmured. "You just know." The dog blinked slowly. Patient. Steady. Connected. And in that quiet connection, the man realized something important. This was the turning point. The moment when gentle intuition became undeniable purpose. When silent presence became a guiding force. When companionship became trust. They had both changed. Quietly. Softly. Profoundly. The man leaned back, smiling faintly, feeling a depth of emotion he hadn't felt in years. And the dog rested, calm as ever, by his side. Because sometimes, the smallest moments carry the heaviest meaning. The days that followed the turning moment felt different. The morning light streamed softly through the workshop windows, painting the wooden floor in warm amber tones. The dog sat in his usual spot, calm and patient, yet the energy between them had shifted. It wasn't just companionship anymore. It was understanding. Silent. Deep. The man went about his work with measured focus, but his eyes often drifted toward the dog. He noticed every subtle movement, the tilt of the head, the gentle flick of an ear, the careful shifting of weight as sunlight moved across the doorway. It was no longer curiosity alone. There was intent. Purpose. Later that morning, as the man prepared to leave briefly for supplies, the dog followed him to the door. Not to leave, but to wait. To guide. The man stepped outside, keys in hand, and noticed something unusual. Across the street, a familiar figure approached, a neighbor, frail and elderly, walking slowly with a cane. Something tugged at the man's attention, but he couldn't yet place it. The dog's ears twitched. His gaze fixed on the approaching figure. And then, softly, he stepped forward, nudging the man gently with his nose. The man understood. He followed the dog's gaze and saw the neighbor falter, losing balance on the uneven sidewalk. Without thinking, the man rushed forward, catching the neighbor just in time. The old woman smiled, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she whispered. The man's eyes went to the dog. He realized, fully and finally, the truth. This dog hadn't just chosen the workshop. He hadn't just chosen him. He had chosen purpose. He had chosen connection. He had chosen to help not only the man, but those around him. The dog's calm, patient observation had guided him to act. Every quiet morning, every soft glance, every moment of waiting had been preparation. The dog had known. He had always known. Tears welled in the man's eyes. He knelt beside the dog, pressing a gentle hand against his warm fur. You've been showing me all along," he whispered. "You've been teaching me." The dog tilted his head, eyes steady, serene. He didn't need to respond. No words could capture the depth of what had passed between them. The man sat there, feeling the weight and warmth of the moment. He thought of all the quiet mornings, all the silent companionship, all the small, seemingly insignificant gestures. Each one had been a thread leading to this, to understanding, to truth, to purpose. Hours passed, unhurried. The sunlight shifted, casting long, soft shadows across the workshop floor. The man and dog remained side by side, comfortable in the quiet understanding they now shared. He realized the bond they had was more than friendship. It was trust, guidance, mutual care. And then, in a quiet voice, he said, "You're not just a dog, are you?" The dog rested his head lightly against the man's knee. No answer was needed. The gesture said everything. The man laughed softly, a sound mingled with tears and relief. "I get it now, you've been guiding me all along. Not just here, not just in this workshop. But in life. In noticing the small things. In being patient. In seeing the truth when it matters most." The dog blinked slowly, the warm afternoon light catching the soft shine of his fur. He shifted slightly, nudging closer to the man's side. The man leaned back, breathing in deeply. The realization settled into his chest like sunlight warming cold stone. Everything made sense now. The dog's presence. His patience. His quiet observation. Every day had been a lesson. Every glance had carried meaning. And it was more beautiful than the man had ever imagined. The workshop no longer felt ordinary. The mornings no longer felt empty. And the man no longer felt alone. He reached down, pressing his hand against the dog's warm back, feeling steady reassurance. "You've given me so much," he whispered. "And I think I understand now." The dog leaned slightly into the touch, as if acknowledging the words. No celebration. No words. Just quiet, shared understanding. The man looked out the window, seeing the street bathed in golden light. He smiled softly, heart full. For the first time in a long time, everything felt right. And the truth behind the dog's presence, was finally clear. The morning light spilled across the street in soft, golden streams. The workshop door opened, and the dog was there. Of course he was. It had become as certain as sunrise. The man stepped out, coffee in hand, and paused. He felt something shift inside him, subtle but profound. The dog's eyes met his, steady and warm. No longer just curious. No longer just patient. Now, calm and knowing. The man smiled. "You ready for today?" he asked softly. The dog wagged his tail once, deliberate and slow. Then, together, they stepped inside the workshop. It was quiet, but no longer empty. Every tool, every beam of light, every shadow seemed part of their shared rhythm. The dog moved through the space with ease, confident and gentle. He no longer waited at the threshold, he belonged inside. The man began work, and the dog settled near his feet, watching attentively. He would occasionally nudge a tool back into place or shift to let sunlight reach the man's hands. Small gestures, simple acts, each one thoughtful, intentional, meaningful. Time moved differently now. Slower. Softer. Richer. Later, the man stepped outside with a tray of fresh lemonade. The dog followed, padding quietly beside him. They settled on the steps together. The sun warmed their backs, and a gentle breeze whispered through the street. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was filled with understanding. With trust. With belonging. "You've made this place brighter," the man said. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "You've made it feel like home." The dog's head lifted slightly. His gaze soft, attentive. No need for words. The man reached down, resting a hand gently on the dog's head. Warm. Solid. Steady. The dog leaned into the touch. They sat like that for a while, letting the quiet moments stretch. The sun dipped lower, casting long amber shadows across the workshop floor. Everything was gentle. Everything was calm. In that stillness, the man realized the truth he had been feeling all along. This dog hadn't just entered his life. He hadn't just chosen to sit outside a workshop one morning. He had chosen connection, companionship, purpose, belonging. The man exhaled slowly, letting the thoughts settle in his chest. "I think we both found something," he murmured. "Something we didn't even know we were looking for." The dog nudged his hand lightly with his nose. A quiet affirmation. A shared understanding. As evening approached, the workshop glowed in the soft light. Shadows danced gently across the walls. The man looked around, noticing every small detail: the worn workbench, the sunlight on the tools, the way the dog's fur caught the light. He smiled. Everything felt in its right place. The dog shifted closer, curling slightly at the man's feet. Not demanding. Not urgent. Just present. The man knelt down, resting a hand against the dog's warm side. "Welcome home," he whispered. And in that quiet, tender moment, the workshop felt complete. Not because of what had been built, but because of who was there. They had both found a place to belong. Outside, the world continued its gentle rhythm: cars passing, neighbors moving, the breeze carrying faint sense of home. Inside, warmth and calm settled deeply. The bond between man and dog was solid, unspoken, and profound. The man rose slowly, stretching, and glanced at his companion. The dog looked back. Eyes steady. Understanding. Connected. It was more than friendship. More than comfort. It was family. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, leaving a sky brushed with amber and soft purple. The workshop lights glowed softly, a haven of warmth. The man and dog remained together, side by side. Quietly. Calmly. Fully. Because sometimes, the greatest truths are not spoken. They are felt. And in that feeling, they found peace. And belonging. The dog rested his head lightly on the man's knee. The man exhaled, eyes closing for a brief moment, a soft smile on his lips. Home. At last. And in that shared presence, everything else fell into place.